In January 2024, NVIDIA became the third most valuable company in the United States, behind only Microsoft and Apple, a chip company, worth more than Amazon, more than Google, more than Tesla. The company's market cap had grown by over $1 trillion in a single year. That had never happened to any company in history. And the strangest part, most people still couldn't explain exactly what NVIDIA does, or why it became so impossible to replace. This episode answers that question. In episodes 1 and 2 of this series, we established something important. The AI economy runs on infrastructure, and a handful of companies control that infrastructure. We looked at how NVIDIA, Microsoft, and OpenAI formed a stack that now sits at the center of the AI industry. And we looked at why the chips powering that stack are so strategically important that the US government restricted their export to China. But we haven't answered the deeper question. Why is NVIDIA specifically so hard to replace? The hardware is part of the answer, but the real answer is something most people never talk about. Let's start with what everyone already knows NVIDIA does. It makes GPUs, graphics processing units, chips that can run thousands of calculations at the same time. That parallel processing architecture turned out to be exactly what AI training requires. Training an AI model means feeding it billions of data points and adjusting billions of internal parameters, simultaneously, over and over, until the model learns. A standard processor does this the way a single expert would, one calculation at a time. Very fast. A GPU does this the way a stadium full of workers would. Thousands of calculations at once, each one simpler. But the combined output is vastly more powerful for this specific task. NVIDIA's flagship AI chip, the H100, can perform approximately 2,000 trillion operations per second. A single H100 costs around $30,000. Training a frontier AI model requires thousands of them running in parallel for months. Which means the hardware bill alone for building a competitive AI model runs into the hundreds of millions of dollars. That's the first wall keeping competitors out, but it's not the highest wall. In 2006, NVIDIA made a decision that looked modest at the time. It released a software platform called CUDA. CUDA Compute, Unified Device Architecture, gave developers a way to program NVIDIA's GPUs for tasks beyond gaming, scientific simulations, data processing, and eventually, artificial intelligence. For years, researchers quietly built their tools, their frameworks, and their entire workflows on top of CUDA, PyTorch. Every major AI development framework was optimized for CUDA. Every AI textbook was written, assuming CUDA. Every AI researcher learned to code, assuming CUDA. And here's why that matters so much. When a competitor releases a better chip, and some have come close, they're not just asking developers to switch hardware. They're asking them to rewrite their code, retrain their teams, rebuild their workflows, and abandon 15 years of accumulated knowledge. That's not a technical barrier. That's a human one. And it may be more powerful than any chip NVIDIA has ever built. But here's what makes NVIDIA's story more interesting than a simple rise to dominance. It almost didn't survive. In 2008, the global financial crisis hit. NVIDIA had just made a series of expensive bets on new chip architecture, and several of them failed. The company reported massive losses. Its stock collapsed. Layoffs followed. There were serious questions about whether NVIDIA would survive as an independent company, but it did. And the experience forced NVIDIA to make decisions that would define everything that came after. It doubled down on GPU computing for non-gaming applications at a time when most of the industry thought that was a distraction. It kept investing in CUDA, even when the returns were unclear. And it stayed the course on a technical architecture that competitors had already abandoned. The AI boom that arrived a decade later didn't find NVIDIA unprepared. It found a company that had spent years building exactly the right infrastructure for exactly this moment. In 2022, NVIDIA released the H100. In practice, it became something closer to a strategic resource. Within months of its release, every major AI lab in the world was trying to buy as many H100s as possible. Waitlists formed. Prices on secondary markets surged to double and triple the retail price. OpenAI needed them to train GPT-4. Google needed them to stay competitive. Entire startups were valued partly based on how many H100s they had secured. The chip became so strategically important that the US government designated it a controlled export, restricting its sale to China specifically because of what it makes possible. Think about that for a moment. A single product from a single company became important enough to reshape US foreign policy. By 2023, every major technology company understood what NVIDIA had built, and almost all of them were trying to escape it. AMD released competitive AI chips. Technically impressive. Significantly cheaper. Intel invested tens of billions trying to rebuild its relevance in AI hardware. Google built its own chips internally, specifically to reduce dependence on NVIDIA. Amazon and Microsoft both developed proprietary AI chips for their cloud platforms. And yet, NVIDIA's market share in AI training chips remained above 80%. The challengers weren't losing because their hardware was bad. They were losing because of CUDA, because of the developer ecosystem, because of the frameworks, because of the institutional knowledge baked into every AI team in the world. You can build a faster road. But if everyone's car only runs on the old road, it doesn't matter. Step back and look at what NVIDIA has actually built. At the hardware layer, the most powerful AI training chips in the world. At the software layer, a platform that 15 years of global AI research has built its entire workflow on top of. At the infrastructure layer, deep integration with every major cloud provider on Earth. And at the geopolitical layer, chips so strategically important that controlling their export has become an instrument of U.S. foreign policy. Hardware, software, infrastructure, geopolitics. NVIDIA doesn't just sell chips. It sits at the foundation of every layer of the AI economy. And in 2024, with AI investment accelerating and demand for compute growing faster than supply, that foundation became the most valuable piece of real estate in technology. In the first quarter of 2024, NVIDIA reported revenue of $26 billion. In the same quarter, 1 year earlier, it reported $7 billion. That is a 262% increase in 12 months. For context, most large technology companies consider 10% annual growth healthy. NVIDIA grew at 262%. Its profit margins, the percentage of revenue it keeps after costs, exceeded 55%. For a hardware company, that is almost unheard of. Hardware companies typically have tight margins because manufacturing is expensive and competitive. NVIDIA was generating software-level profit margins on physical chips. Because when you're the only viable option, you don't have to compete on price. You set the price. So here's where we are. One company controls the hardware that trains one software platform underpins almost every AI development tool in existence. And the financial returns suggest that this position is, for now, essentially uncontested. But there's a question that sits underneath all of this. What happens to every company, in every country, that needs AI but doesn't control the chips that make it possible? What happens when the infrastructure of the most powerful technology in history belongs to a single corporation? NVIDIA didn't plan to end up here. It didn't set out to own the foundation of the AI economy. It just kept building while everyone else was watching the software. And by the time the world understood what it had built, the foundation was already poured. But controlling the chips is only one piece of the AI power structure. Because even with unlimited compute, you still need something else. The model itself, the AI that actually runs on the hardware. And in 2019, a decision was made that would determine who controlled that layer. A nonprofit AI research lab. One that had explicitly set out to prevent any single entity from controlling artificial intelligence, accepted $1 billion investment from one of the largest corporations on Earth. What happened next reshaped the entire AI industry. And the full story of that deal, who wanted what was given up, and what it means for the future of AI, is what Episode 4 is about. Subscribe so you don't miss it.